In 20 minutes, the third round of the FA Cup and Match of the Day. First on BBC One, the main evening news and sport with Peter Sissons and Rob Bonnet.
Russian artillery starts to destroy the centre of the Chechen capital, Grozny. But the Russians lose a top general in the onslaught, and the West pleads again for the guns to stop. Police hunting the Parkhurst escapers admit they had at least a 75-minute start to get off the Isle of Wight. And show business remembers Larry Grayson, who's died at the age of 71. Good evening. Russian forces trying to put down the rebellion in Chechnya have responded quickly to their new orders to get it over with. In line with yesterday's decision by President Yeltsin's inner cabinet, they've laid down a hail of fire on the centre of the capital, Grozny. The Russian government conceded that Chechen separatists were putting up bitter resistance, and the Russians have lost a top general in the fighting. But in the West, Germany's Chancellor Kohl called the bloodshed complete madness and urged Mr. Yeltsin to negotiate. Chechen fighters appealed to the West for help. They said the Russians were destroying the city.
This was the view from inside Grozny's presidential palace early this morning as the Russians again attacked it and again set it on fire. But even as the building burned, Chechen rebels in the bunkers below did their war dance. These men call themselves Smerdniki, death warriors. They've said goodbye to their families, confessed their sins, and they're ready to die. For many of them, it will come to that. Chechen casualties get makeshift medical care inside the palace. But right now, they must be in the most dangerous place on earth. Exactly 1 week after the battle for Grozny began, the Russians have been stepping up their assault on the city. Today is Christmas in the Russian Orthodox calendar, but all President Yeltsin's troops were giving Grozny were mortars and shells and rockets. As usual, the rebels have been resisting tenaciously. One of the Russian generals leading the attack has been killed today. He was the highest-ranking officer to die here so far. But there are reports Russian reinforcements have now been sent into the city, including elite ground assault troops. Stranded civilians like this man and his child have no choice but to run for their lives and right across the line of fire. And suddenly there's worry and dejection on the faces of Chechen fighters. For the first time, some of the Chechen rebels here are admitting that things are not going well. It seems that Russian forces are now inching their way towards the square that houses the presidential palace. Britain is a great power and must use its influence on Yeltsin, this rebel told me. The Russians are annihilating us as we fight for our freedom. They're killing our women and our children. The Russians have succeeded in virtually destroying the presidential palace. It's in flames. But the rebels here insist the fight for independence this building has come to symbolize will never end. Ben Brown, BBC News, Grozny.
The Foreign Secretary, Douglas Hurd, has sent a message to his Russian counterpart to express Britain's concern over the crisis. Mr. Hurd called for an early end to the fighting and a negotiated settlement. I'm joined now from Moscow by our correspondent Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, why aren't these appeals from the West having any effect in Moscow?
Well, first of all, Yeltsin's in a very difficult position domestically. There's not a great deal he can do. He can't apologize to the Chechens and send the troops home. For a negotiation, you need two sides who want to compromise, and we don't have that in this case. Also, I think he feels there's a limit to what the West will actually do. Chancellor Kohl said it was madness to fight in Chechnya, but he also ruled out any talk of sanctions.
There have been some dire warnings in Russia about the damage this has the potential to inflict on the new democracy there. Are those warnings, are those forebodings widely shared?
Well, yes, insofar as Yeltsin at the moment is not acting like a Democrat. There was a time when he could carry his policies on a wave of public acclaim, but now he's surrounded by a group of generals and bureaucrats from the security ministries who are, some people say, telling him what to do. Now that, of course, is deeply worrying for the fabric of democracy in this country.
What's your own gut feeling about the prospects?
I think Yeltsin has been very weakened by this particular crisis. I think he's going to find it very hard to get elected at the next elections, and I think that maybe democracy is going to take a long time to recover.
Jeremy Bowen in Moscow, thank you very much. Here, the Director of Security for the Prison Service, Richard Tilt, says he's pleased with progress so far in the inquiry into the escape at Parkhurst. Police on the Isle of Wight have established that the 3 prisoners were seen outside the jail at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening, more than an hour before they were reported missing.
An hour after they were last seen in the jail, the 3 convicts were spotted crossing this road a few hundred yards away, and police want to interview 5 youths waiting here for a bus who may also have seen them. The search is on for a transit-type van seen parked on the road and left on a nearby housing estate for 2 days, a red Ford Escort, which disappeared soon after the men were seen. The confirmed sighting of the 3 convicts here at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening means that they would have had time to get to the mainland before their escape was discovered in the jail an hour and a quarter later. Video pictures of traffic on board the Solent ferries on Tuesday night are now being rechecked for the 2 vehicles. But police, continuing to search rural and empty buildings, think it's likely that the men are still on the Isle of Wight. Though in such a tight community, senior officers say they are surprised that no one has reported another sighting of the convicts.
If this is as well planned as we believe it to have been, then if there was a safe house arranged, a cottage, a flatlet or something like that, and there's many of those on the Isle of Wight, then if they're lying low on the island, then we wouldn't be seeing them.
Back at the jail, relations between the prison service and the officers at Parkhurst seem to have improved today. The head of the service, Derek Lewis, on the left at Parkhurst yesterday, complained that the officers were not cooperating fully with the inquiry into the escape. The security director, Richard Tilt, on the right, said today that he had better cooperation and the inquiry was now moving forward. Mike Smart, BBC News, at Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight.
The Transport Secretary, Brian Mawhinney, says he'll reject proposals from the rail regulator cutting back the number of stations where passengers can buy tickets for through journeys. The regulator's consultative document isn't due to be published until next week. But Dr Mawhinney tonight described the plan as unacceptable.
Commuter stations like Ashford in Kent may no longer sell tickets to destinations throughout the country if one option being considered by the railway regulator is implemented. One proposal to be put forward in a consultative document suggests drastic